Now that we've gone over the basic parts of 14 CFR that an AMT needs to know, let's hone in on the ones that we're going to get a little more personal with. We're going to go over Part 1, Part 21, Part 23, and Part 43. So if you're wondering how to get access to these, again, the Dynamic Regulatory System website, it's drs.faa.gov. So if you're accessing this from your laptop, you can just open up another tab and do that. If you're accessing this from your phone, or if you want to use your phone alongside your laptop, then scan the QR code right here, and it's going to bring you to this website. This website has a lot of very important information that we're going to be going over throughout this unit, but what I'm going to focus on right now is the regulations. So if you click here on regulations, once you get to the drs.faa.gov website, you're going to click here at 14 CFR, which is ours, and then we're going to do Title 14 CFR by part and section. So again, the first one that we're going to be going over today is Part 1, the definitions and abbreviations. Again, my hope is that you're following along with me, whether it's in another tab or whether you have this going. So, if you click Part 1, and then go to General Definitions, what's going to happen is that it's going to open up a PDF, and it's going to give a large amount of general definitions. What I'm going to invite you to do is look for the definition of preventative maintenance. So again, go ahead to this document and look at the preventive maintenance. You could do this by doing Control F. We could just scroll down. Aha, helps if I spell it right. Control F would have worked here, but if you look here, it says preventative maintenance. This means the simple or minor preservation of operations and the replacement of small standard parts not involving complex assembly operations. Later in Chapter 5, in Unit 5, when you're going to be learning about mechanic privileges and limitations, you're going to learn the difference between a minor repair and a major repair. We'll go a little bit into this today as well, but we'll go more into detail with this later. But all you need to know with preventive maintenance is that it's a minor repair or fix that doesn't involve complex operations. So now that I've shown you what that definition means, I'm going to ask you on your own to look up the definition of maintenance using the same document. Go ahead. Let's see what you can do. You're just getting back with me. You should have now found the definition of maintenance and been able to type that into your pop-up question. Again, thank you for making sure that you do that. Definitions are really key in a lot of what we do in aviation, especially from a legal perspective. You're going to be referencing this section quite a bit, actually. So again, hopefully this exercise has gotten you at least a little bit familiar with the general definitions that we use in aviation. So now that we have an understanding of that, let's take a look. Instead of at Part 1, let's jump over to Part 21, the certification procedures for products and articles. Again, the main idea of this is that whenever a part is put into circulation to be used on aircraft, it has to be certified down to the last bolt. And again, that's super important, especially from an aircraft accident investigation perspective. So again, if you want to know how to get a part that you're making certified, let's say you're an engineer and you want to put in a new different type of engine, this part is especially important for you. So let's take a look over here. Section 21 is very massive. And there's, again, type certificates. There's all kinds of stuff in here. What I'm gonna give you a case scenario that will use this situation. I'm gonna read this out. This is actually one of the prepware test questions that they recommend for the test, and I'm just gonna read this word for word right here. An aircraft was not approved to return to service after an annual inspection. The owner wants to fly the aircraft to another maintenance base, but since it's not airworthy, they're not able to do so. Which of the following statements is correct? A, the owner must obtain a special flight permit. B, the aircraft may be flown without restriction up to 10 hours to reach another maintenance base. Or C, the owner must obtain a restricted category type certificate. The answer to this you can find in 21.197. So I'm going to scroll down to 0.197 here. And let's see what good information they can give us here. Special flight permits. So if you click on that, it gives us some information right here. And it basically says, a special flight permit may be issued for an aircraft that may not currently meet applicable airworthiness requirements, but is capable of safe flight. And in this case, that very well applies. It can be done for delivering the new aircraft, flying it to a base where repairs will be made. Essentially, it gives it for the following purposes, and then it says in Part B that a special flight permit can be issued to authorize the operation of the aircraft. So that's really the key answer right here. And you may remember that I verbally said to you that choice A in that said that the owner must obtain a special flight permit. So that's the procedure right there. So if you have an aircraft that's not airworthy, but you need to transfer it to a different base, you use a special flight permit. Now that you have a basic understanding of what 14 CFR Part 21 does, I'm going to ask you to do a few case scenario or test questions that will help you to get a little more familiar with this. Thank you for doing those quiz questions. Now, let's jump into Part 23. Part 23 is the airworthiness standards for normal category airplanes. Airworthiness, basically, it's the idea that a plane is able to fly safely. And airworthiness standards, what this means is that if, let's say you're a designer and you want to design a new airplane, or you want to make an adjustment to an airplane, these are the standards you have to follow to make sure that your design or your adjustment are airworthy, that they're actually safe to fly. So again, Part 23 is really important. Let's dive into it, and I'm going to give you one case scenario right here. Later on in this class, you're going to get the privilege to learn about weight and center of gravity. It's the weight and balance unit. I believe it's Unit 7 that we're going to do. And with weight and center of gravity, there are certain standards that you have to apply to. Weight and center of gravity, basically, the idea behind it is that when you add weight to your aircraft, it's going to change its flight characteristics. Maybe it'll take longer to get off the runway. It'll affect your airspeed, it'll affect the bank angles you can take, etc. So they want you to have good data and information about weight and center of gravity, and they put it on a sheet that you're going to learn about later in this section called a type certificate data sheet. And I want to show you right here what the actual regulations are about weight and center of gravity and what information needs to be included. So the applicant for a type certificate needs to determine limits for weights and centers of gravity that provide for the safe operation of an airplane. So how much weight can you put on the airplane and where can you place the weight in order to be within a safe operating envelope? The applicant must comply with each requirement of the subpart at critical combinations of the weight and center of gravity within the airplane's range of loading conditions using tolerances acceptable to the administration. Again, same idea. Where do you place the weight? How much weight do you put on? And is it within an acceptable range as determined by the FAA? And the condition of the airplane at the time of determining its empty weight and center of gravity must be well defined and easily repeatable. So let's say that the people that are looking over your application for an airplane design want to double check and make sure that your calculations are correct for the center of gravity it has to be easily repeatable so they themselves can repeat that calculation. So that's one example of 14 CFR Part 23. Again, it discusses the airworthiness standards when you're applying for a type certificate. So now that you understand that, I'm going to have you do a little bit of research on Part 23 yourself, answer a question, and then we'll move on to the next part. Thank you for doing that quiz question. Let's go ahead and jump to Part 43. So again, we're back here on the website. I'm going to bring down Part 23 and scroll down to Part 43. Part 43 is bread and butter in this industry. It basically gives the administrative procedures for maintenance, preventive maintenance, and etc. And Part 43 is massive. There's a lot to it, and there's also a bunch of appendixes. We're going to learn a lot about Appendix A in Unit 5, so even though you may have some quiz questions that touch on this, I'm not going to touch into it too much because I don't want to spoil Unit 5 for you. But Appendix A discusses major alterations, major repairs, and preventive maintenance, and also a bunch of rules about, lots of different things. But one thing I want to go over with you right now is 4315. It discusses the additional performance rules for inspections. If we click that up, what you're going to see here, and again, I hope you're following along, is that you very often, as a aircraft maintenance technician, have to perform what's called a 100-hour inspection. And the 100-hour inspection is one of the only inspections that you can do without requiring a licensed inspector to send it back in the service. You can do one yourself if you have the experience of doing it before, and you can send the aircraft back in the service without needing the services of an inspector. So I want to go into this a little bit because it discusses different things that need to be looked at when you're doing a 100-hour inspection. So I want to read through a couple of these for you. So under annual and 100-hour inspections, and again, you can find this, this is 14 CFR section 43, and then subsection 15, right? So we have 43.15, and I'm going to scroll down to where I see 100-hour inspections right here. It says, each person performing an annual or 100-hour inspection shall use a checklist while performing the inspection. The checklist can be the person's own design or one provided by the manufacturer. And the checklist has to include the scope and detail of items that are included in Appendix D and in Paragraph B of this section. So if we take a look even further, so it talks about that it has to include the items contained in Appendix D. So what I'm going to do here, I think this will be a good exercise, is I'm going to go back to Part 43 here, and I'm going to scroll down to Appendix D. And let's learn a little bit more about the details that need to be included in a 100-hour inspections. What exactly needs to be looked at? So it looks over here that when you're doing a 1-hour inspection, 100-hour inspection, you've got to remove inspection plates and access doors and clean the aircraft. You've got to inspect fabric and skin, systems and components, envelope, gas bags, ballast, tanks. See, looks like you have to clean the cockpit for cleanliness. You got to check on the seats and the safety belts for defects. You got to check windows and windshields for breakage, instruments, flight and engine controls, batteries. So I can go into all of this, but essentially there are federal rules on what should be inspected in a 100-hour inspection. Very important to note. So now that we have an understanding of this, what I'd like you to do is solve a couple problems for me about Part 43. Do a little bit of research and look at the different parts of Part 43. Get comfortable with it because this is going to be your bread and butter. Let's go ahead and do those quiz questions. Okay, thank you for doing those quiz questions. See you on the next one.